My name is Paula, and I am 56 years old. I raised my son alone after my husband passed away. I gave him everything a mother could give. But sometimes life teaches you that love is not always returned the way you expect. The moment hot coffee splashed across my face and chest, burning my skin, I realized my son had become a stranger. But what he did not know was what I had in my pocket. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe. Have you ever thought you truly knew your own child? Stay with me. My husband Robert and I met when we were both young and full of dreams. I was 22 years old, working as an assistant at a small construction company in Houston. Robert was a project coordinator, always staying late to finish his work. We started talking during lunch breaks, sharing sandwiches and stories about our futures. Within a year, we were married in a small ceremony at the local church. Our first home was a one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet that Robert promised to fix every weekend but never quite got around to. Robert had a dream that burned inside him like a constant flame. He wanted to start his own real estate company. He would stay up late at night, sketching out business plans on napkins and the backs of envelopes. I believed in him completely. I told him we could do it together. In 1995, we took out a loan from the bank that made my hands shake when I signed the papers. We called our company Harrison Realty, named after Robert's grandfather, who had taught him the value of hard work. Those early years tested everything we had. I did the accounting, the marketing, the customer service calls. I learned how to negotiate with bankers and smooth over angry clients. Robert handled the property deals and built relationships with investors. There were nights when we could not afford to pay the electricity bill. We ate ramen noodles for weeks at a time. I sold my grandmother's gold necklace to cover payroll one month. But we never gave up. We held on to each other and kept pushing forward. Our son Derek came into the world in 1991 when the company was just starting to find its footing. I remember Robert holding him in the hospital room, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me and said, "I am going to build an empire for this boy." I believed every word. Derek was the center of our universe from that moment on. We enrolled him in the best private schools we could afford. We gave him tutors, summer camps, and every opportunity we never had growing up. But somewhere along the way, I noticed something that worried me. Derek was smart, there was no denying that. He could charm anyone with his smile and quick wit. But he was lazy. He expected things to be handed to him. When he struggled with homework, he would throw tantrums until someone did it for him. When he did not make the basketball team, he blamed the coach instead of practicing harder. I tried to teach him about the value of work, about earning what you have. Robert always stepped in to protect him. "He is just a boy," Robert would say. "He will grow out of it." Derek graduated from college with average grades and a sense of entitlement that made me uneasy. He joined Harrison Realty, immediately taking a corner office and a salary that most employees had worked years to achieve. I wanted to protest, but Robert insisted. "Family takes care of family," he said. "Our son deserves to learn the business from the inside." I hoped Robert was right. I hoped that responsibility would shape Derek into the man I knew he could become. By then, Harrison Realty had grown into one of the largest real estate companies in the Texas region. Our annual revenue reached tens of millions of dollars. We owned properties across the state and employed over 100 people. What most people did not know was how much of that success came from my work. Robert was the face of the company. He attended the galas and shook hands with politicians. But I was the brain behind the curtain. I reviewed every contract, managed every financial decision, negotiated with every bank. I signed the documents that kept us solvent during economic downturns. I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. balancing the books. Derek grew up watching his father in the spotlight. He never saw me working late in my office. He never noticed the stacks of paperwork on my desk or the phone calls I took during dinner. To him, His father built everything. His mother was just there existing in the background like a piece of furniture. I did not correct him. I did not need the glory. I just wanted my family to thrive. Looking back now, I wonder if that was my biggest mistake. I smiled when I thought about those years. Robert and I had built something from nothing. We had love, we had a successful business, we had a son. I thought that was everything a person could wish for. I did not know that after Robert left this world, everything I believed was solid would slowly crumble beneath my feet. 3 years ago, my world shattered into a million pieces. Robert had been playing golf with his friends on a Saturday morning, something he did every week to relax. I was at home preparing lunch and planning our anniversary dinner for the following month. The phone rang, and a voice I did not recognize told me that my husband had collapsed on the 9th hole. Heart attack. By the time I reached the hospital, driving faster than I had ever driven in my life, he was already gone. The funeral was enormous. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. Business partners, employees, old friends, distant relatives I had not seen in decades. Derek stood beside me throughout the service, his hand on my shoulder, his voice steady when he gave the eulogy. I looked at him and thought, my son has become a man. I was proud of him in that moment. I believed he would be my rock, my support through the dark days ahead. Robert's will was straightforward. He left 50% of the company to me and 50% to Derek. But there was one crucial provision that Robert had insisted upon. I would retain final decision-making authority on all major company matters. Robert knew perhaps better than anyone that I was the one who truly understood the business. He wanted to make sure I would always have the power to protect what we had built together. The first month after the funeral, Derek was attentive and caring. He called me every morning to check on me. He came over for dinner 3 times a week. He asked for my advice on business decisions and listened carefully to my answers. His wife Stephanie was equally sweet. She brought me flowers and invited me to their home for family gatherings. I felt surrounded by love during the darkest time of my life. But then slowly, things began to change. Derek started making decisions at the company without consulting me first. He hired new executives I had never met. He restructured departments without asking my opinion. When I questioned him about these changes, he would wave his hand dismissively. "Mom, you should rest," he would say. "You have been through so much. Let me handle things for a while." I noticed that Derek had moved into Robert's old office. He changed the furniture, took down the family photos, replaced them with modern art that meant nothing to me. Some of our longest-serving employees started leaving. When I asked Derek about it, he said they were not keeping up with the times. "We need fresh blood," he explained. "People who understand the current market." Stephanie's behavior shifted as well. The sweetness faded, replaced by something sharper. At a family dinner one evening, she looked at me across the table and said, "Mom, you should really consider traveling. You are getting older, and there is no point sitting around the office all day." I waited for Derek to say something to defend me. He stayed silent, cutting his steak as if he had not heard a word. Stephanie began limiting my time with my grandson, Ethan. He was 7 years old, the light of my life. I used to pick him up from school twice a week and take him for ice cream. But suddenly, Stephanie had excuses every time I called. Ethan has extra tutoring. Ethan is tired. Ethan needs to spend more time with children his own age. When I protested gently, she said something that cut me to the bone. "You teach him outdated values, Mom. I want Ethan exposed to a more modern environment." I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling of the bedroom I had shared with Robert for over 30 years. I whispered into the darkness, "Do you see what is happening? Our son is changing." There was no answer, just the silence of an empty house that suddenly felt colder than it ever had before. Carl had worked for Harrison Realty for 23 years. He was our financial manager, a quiet man with thick glasses and an unwavering sense of integrity. Robert had trusted him completely, and so did I. When he called me one afternoon and asked to meet privately, his voice sounded strained in a way I had never heard before. We met at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town, far from anyone who might recognize us. Carl looked around nervously before speaking. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, "I need to tell you something, but I do not know if I should." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Carl, you have been with us since the beginning. Whatever it is, I need to know." He told me that Derek had been making significant changes to the company's financial procedures without authorization. Large sums of money were being moved into accounts that Carl could not access or monitor. Derek had hired a new accountant, a young woman who reported directly to him and refused to share information with anyone else. When Carl tried to question these changes, Derek told him to mind his own business or start looking for another job. My hands trembled as I listened. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked. Carl shook his head. "I cannot be certain, but based on what I have seen, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more." I asked him to keep this conversation between us and to continue gathering information quietly. He agreed, though I could see the fear in his eyes. The next week, I made an appointment with Mr. Warren, the attorney who had handled our family's legal matters for over 25 years. He had drawn up Robert's will, managed our contracts, and advised us through countless business challenges. If anyone could help me understand my rights, it was him. Mr. Warren confirmed what I already suspected. According to Robert's will, I still held veto power over all major company decisions. Without my signature, Derek could not sell properties, take on major debt, or restructure the business in any significant way. But then, Mr. Warren told me something that made my blood run cold. Derek contacted another attorney last month, he said. He was asking about procedures for challenging the terms of a will. Specifically, he wanted to know about declaring a family member mentally incompetent. I stared at Mr. Warren in disbelief. My own son was looking for ways to have me declared unfit to manage my own affairs. I knew I needed to find out more. The following weekend, I went to the office when no one else was there. Derek had never changed the password on his computer. It was still the same one Robert had used for years our wedding anniversary. I felt guilty as I logged in, but that guilt disappeared quickly when I saw what was in his email folder. There were dozens of messages between Derek and an attorney I did not recognize. They discussed strategies for removing me from the company. They talked about having me evaluated by a doctor who could be persuaded to write a favorable report. They estimated how long the legal process would take, but the emails that hurt the most were between Derek and Stephanie. In one message, Stephanie wrote, "We need to move faster. The old woman is still sharp, and that makes this harder." Derek replied, "Do not worry. I will convince her to sign the papers at the family meeting next week. Once she does, we can put her in a care facility and sell the house." I printed every email. My hands shook as the pages came out of the printer. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away. There was no time for crying. Robert had taught me something valuable over our years in business. Information is power. And now, I held all the power I needed. I drove home through the dark streets, my mind racing. $20,000. Months of planning. All the hopes and dreams I had poured into raising my son. It all came down to this. He wanted to take everything from me. He wanted to lock me away and pretend I never existed. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, letting the engine cool. When I finally walked through my front door, something inside me had shifted. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. I was done being the quiet woman in the background. I was done letting other people decide my fate. Robert had built this company, but I had kept it alive. And I would not let anyone, not even my own son, take that away from me. The first person I called was Gloria. She had been my best friend since high school, a former nurse with a sharp tongue and a heart of gold. Her husband had passed away 5 years before Robert, so she understood the loneliness of widowhood better than anyone. When I told her everything I had discovered, she was furious. That ungrateful little monster, she said over the phone. I am coming over right now to give him a piece of my mind. I stopped her before she could grab her car keys. No, Gloria, we cannot do it that way. We have to be smart about this. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Gloria sighed. You are right. You were always the smart one. So, what is the plan? I told her I did not have a complete plan yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to be a victim. I had spent my entire life building something meaningful, and I would protect it with everything I had. Gloria promised to stand by me no matter what happened. Before we hung up, she said something that stayed with me. Paula, for 35 years, you stood in Robert's shadow because you chose to. Maybe it is time for you to step into the light. The next morning, I returned to Mr. Warren's office with a folder full of printed emails. He reviewed them carefully, his face growing more serious with each page. Mrs. Harrison, he said finally, these documents show clear evidence of conspiracy to defraud and potentially elder abuse. You have grounds for criminal charges if you choose to pursue them. I shook my head. I do not want to put my son in prison. I just want to protect myself and protect the company. Can you help me do that? Mr. Warren nodded and began outlining our options. First, he would prepare a new will that would completely change my estate plan. Under the current will, Derek would inherit my share of the company when I passed away. Under the new will, everything would go into a trust for my grandson, Ethan. Derek and Stephanie would have no access to the money or the business. Ethan would receive his inheritance when he turned 25, old enough to make responsible decisions. Second, Mr. Warren would prepare legal documents that would allow me to immediately suspend Derek's authority at the company if necessary. As the holder of veto power, I could remove him from his position at any time. I had simply never exercised that right because I trusted my son. I signed the new will on a Friday morning one day before the family meeting Derek had scheduled. Mr. Warren notarized every page and gave me a certified copy. I folded it carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of my jacket. It felt light, just a few sheets of paper. But it carried the weight of my entire future. That evening, I laid out my clothes for the next day. I chose the navy blue suit I had worn when we opened the first Harrison Realty office 3 decades ago. It still fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the mirror and spoke out loud. Tomorrow is your day, Paula. Do not be afraid. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table watching the sun rise over the garden that Robert had planted with roses the year before he died. I thought about all the mornings we had shared in this kitchen, talking about our dreams and our worries. I missed him so much it hurt, but I also knew that he would want me to fight. He would want me to protect everything we had built together. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. I took a deep breath, smoothed my jacket, and felt the folded papers in my pocket. Then I walked to the door and opened it. Derek stood on the porch, wearing an expensive suit and a smile that did not reach his eyes. Stephanie was beside him, carrying a leather briefcase. I noticed she had gotten her hair done recently, probably at one of those salons that charge more for a cut than I used to pay for a week of groceries. Come in, I said, stepping aside. I have made coffee. We settled in the living room. I sat in the armchair that had always been mine, the one with the view of Robert's rose garden. Derek and Stephanie took the sofa across from me. The coffee table between us felt like a battlefield. Derek began with small talk. How are you feeling, Mom? Are you sleeping well? Have you been taking your vitamins? I answered briefly, giving nothing away. Then Stephanie opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Derek cleared his throat. Mom, we asked for this meeting because we need to talk about the future of the company. I nodded for him to continue. You have done so much over the years, he said, and we are grateful. But the business world is changing fast. We need leadership that can keep up with modern trends. Young blood, fresh ideas. I remained silent, waiting. Derek leaned forward. We think it is time for you to step back completely. Retire. Enjoy your golden years. Travel, spend time with friends, relax. You have earned it. Stephanie pushed the documents across the coffee table toward me. We have prepared everything, she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. All you need to do is sign, and you will not have to worry about the company ever again. I picked up the papers and began reading. It was exactly what I expected. A complete transfer of my shares, my voting rights, and my decision-making authority to Derek. If I signed this, I would have nothing left. No ownership, no control, no say in the company I had helped build from the ground up. I looked at my son. You really think I would sign this? Derek's smile faltered slightly. Mom, it is for the best. You are not as young as you used to be. The stress is not good for you. I set the papers down. And what exactly would happen to me after I signed? Stephanie jumped in. We would take care of you, of course. We have already looked at some lovely retirement communities, places where you could be comfortable and safe. Retirement communities, I repeated. You mean nursing homes? Derek stood up, his voice rising with frustration. Mom, stop being difficult. This is going to happen one way or another. We are trying to do this the easy way. I stood up too, facing my son directly. The easy way for whom Derek's face twisted with anger. For everyone. You are too old to run this company. You never really ran it anyway. Dad built everything. You just sat in the background pushing papers. You are nothing without him. Those words hung in the air like a physical blow. I had dedicated my life to this family, to this company. I had sacrificed everything, and this was how my son saw me. Nothing. Derek stepped closer, his voice getting louder. I am trying to protect the family legacy. I am trying to make sure this company survives, and you are standing in my way because you cannot accept that your time is over. I remained calm, though my heart was pounding. My time is over! Yes, Derek shouted. You are too old to answer to me, to challenge me, to tell me what to do. I am the future of this company. You are the past. Everything happened quickly after that. Derek grabbed the cup of coffee from the table. It was still hot. Before I could react, he threw the contents directly at my face. The pain was immediate and intense. Hot liquid splashed across my cheeks. My forehead dripped down onto my chest. I stumbled backward, gasping. Stephanie screamed, but made no move to help. Derek stood frozen, perhaps shocked by his own actions. For a long moment, nobody moved. Coffee dripped from my chin onto the carpet Robert and I had picked out together 20 years ago. My skin burned, my eyes stung, but I did not fall. I did not cry out again. I did not beg for help. Instead, I slowly reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my handkerchief. I wiped my face carefully, methodically. Each movement was deliberate. Each second stretched into eternity. Derek watched me, his breathing heavy, his expression uncertain. When my face was as clean as I could make it, I reached into my inside pocket. My fingers found the folded papers. I pulled them out and opened them carefully, then laid them flat on the coffee table in front of my son. I spoke in a voice that surprised me with its steadiness. This is my new will. I signed it yesterday. It replaces everything in your father's original estate plan. Derek grabbed the papers and began reading. With each line, his face grew paler. Stephanie snatched them from his hands, and her eyes went wide. I continued. You will not receive a single dollar when I die. Everything goes into a trust for Ethan. He will receive his inheritance when he turns 25. You and Stephanie will have no access to the funds and no control over the company. Derek looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing without words. I held his gaze. You just destroyed your own future son. You did it with a cup of coffee and words you cannot take back. Derek's hands trembled as he held the papers. This cannot be legal, he said, his voice cracking. You cannot do this. I can, I replied. And I did. Mr. Warren handled everything properly. There is nothing you can challenge. Stephanie stood up, tears streaming down her face. She clutched my arm. Mom, please, you have to understand. We did not mean any of this. Derek has been under so much stress. We love you. We would never actually hurt you. I looked at her hand on my arm and then at her face. You wanted to put me in a nursing home and sell my house. You called me an old woman who was in the way. Do not tell me about love. I pulled my arm free and stepped back. Derek tried a different approach. Mom, I am sorry. I lost my temper. The coffee I did not mean. He could not even finish the sentence. I shook my head. Your temper showed me exactly who you are, and your emails showed me exactly what you planned. Yes, Derek, I found them. Every single one. The conversations with your lawyer about having me declared incompetent. The messages with Stephanie about putting me away. I have copies of everything. Derek went pale. How did you? The password on your computer, I said. Your father's wedding anniversary. You never thought to change it. You never thought I would look. Stephanie grabbed Derek's arm. What do we do now? I answered before Derek could speak. Here is what happens now. On Monday morning, I will return to the company as chairman of the board. Derek, you are suspended from all decision-making authority, pending an independent audit of our finances. You cannot do that, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. I can. Your father's will gave me final say on all major matters. I have never used that power because I trusted you. That was my mistake. Derek started to argue, but I held up my hand. If the audit reveals any financial irregularities, I will not hesitate to involve the authorities. You have taken money from this company. Carl has been tracking the discrepancies. We both know what he will find. Derek sat down heavily on the sofa. He looked smaller somehow, like a child who had been caught stealing. Mom, he said quietly, you will destroy our reputation. You will destroy the family name. I walked toward the front door and opened it. You did that yourself a long time ago. I am just trying to save what is left. Now please leave my house. Stephanie grabbed her briefcase and hurried out without looking at me. Derek moved more slowly. At the door, he stopped and turned back. Is there any way to fix this? I considered his question. Come back to me in a year. Show me with your actions that you have changed. Words mean nothing anymore. He nodded and walked out into the morning sunshine. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. My face still stung from the coffee, but somewhere deep inside, I felt something I had not felt in 3 years. I felt strong. The following days moved quickly. I went to the hospital to have my burns examined. The doctor said they were first-degree burns, painful, but not serious. She gave me cream to apply and warned me to watch for signs of infection. Mr. Warren helped me file the necessary paperwork to formally suspend Derek from his position. The board of directors, most of whom had known me for decades, supported my decision without hesitation. Carl began the audit, immediately working with an outside accounting firm to ensure impartiality. The results were worse than I expected. Derek had transferred over $200,000 into personal accounts over the past 2 years. He had approved inflated contracts with vendors who kicked back portions of their payments to him. He had used company funds to pay for vacations, jewelry for Stephanie, and a sports car that was supposedly a business expense. When confronted with the evidence, Derek admitted everything. He agreed to repay the funds and resign from all positions within the company. In exchange, I agreed not to press criminal charges. I did this not for Derek, but for Ethan. I did not want my grandson to grow up with a father in prison. 1 month after the family meeting, Stephanie filed for divorce. She had married Derek for his money and his future. Without either, she had no reason to stay. I found it impossible to feel sorry for her. The court granted me regular visitation with Ethan. Stephanie, perhaps hoping to stay in my good graces for financial reasons, did not fight this. Every Sunday, I picked up my grandson, and we spent the day together. We went to the park. We baked cookies. We read stories. He never asked about the problems between the adults. He was just happy to see his grandmother. 3 months after everything fell apart, I sat in the office that had once belonged to my husband. I had repainted the walls and brought back the family photos. On my desk sat a framed picture of Robert and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful, and completely unaware of all the challenges ahead. There was a knock at the door. Carl entered with the quarterly financial report. The company was recovering. Profits were up. Employee morale had improved. I signed the report and thanked Carl for his loyalty and courage. After he left, I looked out the window at the city skyline. Robert and I had watched this view together countless times, dreaming about the future. Now I was watching it alone. But I was not afraid anymore. The months that followed were a journey of rediscovery. For so long, I had defined myself through my roles: wife, mother, business partner, grandmother. Now I had to figure out who Paula was when she was not taking care of everyone else. I started by visiting my sister Margaret in Arizona. We had drifted apart over the years, both of us busy with our own lives. But when I showed up at her door unannounced, she pulled me into a hug and did not let go for a long time. We spent 2 weeks together, talking about our childhood, our parents, our dreams that had come true, and the ones that had not. Margaret listened to everything that had happened with Derek. She did not judge or give advice. She just held my hand and let me cry when I needed to cry. On my last night there, she said something that stuck with me. "Paula, you spent your whole life making other people feel safe. Maybe it is time you learned how to feel safe yourself." When I returned home, I joined a support group for women who had experienced family trauma. I was nervous at first, worried about sharing my private pain with strangers. But I found that telling my story helped me understand it better. And hearing other women's stories made me realize I was not alone. I made new friends in that group. Barbara had been cheated out of her inheritance by her brothers. Donna had been emotionally abused by her daughter for years. Susan had survived a marriage to a man who had hidden a secret family in another state. Each of us carried our own wounds, but together, we found ways to heal. Gloria convinced me to take a trip to New Orleans. It was my first vacation in longer than I could remember. We ate beignets at Café du Monde, listened to jazz on Bourbon Street, and took a riverboat cruise on the Mississippi. I laughed more in those 4 days than I had in the past 4 years. I also returned to an old passion I had abandoned decades ago. When I was young, before Robert, before the company, before everything, I had loved to paint. Watercolors mostly. Flowers and landscapes and quiet scenes of daily life. Marriage and motherhood had pushed that part of me aside. There was never enough time, never enough energy. Now I had both. I set up a small studio in the spare bedroom and bought paints and brushes and canvases. My first attempts were clumsy and disappointing, but I kept trying. Slowly, my hands remembered what they once knew. The colors began to blend the way I wanted them to. I painted Robert's rose garden at sunset. I painted the view from our first apartment's tiny window. I painted Ethan chasing butterflies in the park. I learned to enjoy my own company. For the first time in my life, I ate dinner alone without feeling lonely. I read books I had always meant to read. I watched old movies and fell asleep on the couch without anyone to tell me I should go to bed properly. My relationship with Ethan grew deeper and more precious. Every Sunday, he ran to my car with his arms wide open. We had our rituals now. Ice cream after lunch, a walk by the lake, story time before I drove him home. I taught him about kindness, about honesty, about treating people with respect. I told him stories about his grandfather, about the man Robert had been before Ethan was born. One Sunday, Ethan looked up at me with his big brown eyes and said, "Grandma, you are the strongest person I know." I hugged him tight, trying not to cry. If I had done nothing else right in my life, at least I had this. At least I had this one small person who believed in me. A year after the coffee incident, Derek reached out. He sent me a letter, handwritten on plain paper. He did not ask for money or forgiveness. He simply wrote about his experiences in therapy. He wrote about the anger and resentment he had carried for years, the way he had blamed others for his own failures. He wrote that he was sorry, truly sorry, and that he understood if I never wanted to see him again. I read the letter several times before responding. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. When he walked in, he looked different, thinner, more tired, but also somehow softer, less defensive. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his treatment, about the work he was doing to understand himself. He admitted that he had been jealous of my relationship with his father. He had resented being compared to Robert, felt he could never measure up. He had taken that resentment out on me because I was an easier target. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I told him I appreciated his honesty. I told him I was proud of him for seeking help, but I also told him that trust once broken takes a long time to rebuild. Words were a start, but I needed to see consistent actions over months and years. He nodded and said he understood. He did not push for more than I was willing to give. When we said goodbye, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, more like the beginning of possibility. The second anniversary of Robert's death arrived on a quiet Tuesday. I visited his grave and sat on the bench beside it for hours. I told him everything that had happened, everything I had done and learned. I thanked him for believing in me all those years. I apologized for the times I had doubted myself. When I stood up to leave, I felt lighter than I had in a very long time. The grief was still there, would always be there. But it no longer crushed me. It had become something I carried with me, a reminder of love rather than loss. Time continued to pass. The company thrived under my leadership. I hired a new generation of employees who brought fresh ideas while respecting the values Robert and I had established. I mentored young women in business, sharing the lessons I had learned the hard way. I established a scholarship fund in Robert's name for students from low-income families who wanted to study real estate. Derek continued his slow path toward redemption. He got a job at a small company across town, starting from the bottom and working his way up. He paid back every dollar he had taken from Harrison Realty. He showed up consistently for his time with Ethan. He sent me birthday cards and Mother's Day flowers, never asking for anything in return. I did not fully trust him yet. Perhaps I never would. But I had made peace with that uncertainty. Some wounds heal completely. Others leave scars that remind us of our strength. On the day I turned 57, I threw myself a birthday party. Gloria helped me decorate the house with balloons and streamers. Margaret flew in from Arizona. The friends I had made in my support group brought potluck dishes and heartfelt cards. Ethan wore a tiny suit and helped me blow out the candles on my cake. Derek sent a bouquet of roses and a card that said simply, "Happy birthday, Mom. I hope this year brings you joy." He did not come to the party. We had agreed it was too soon for that, but I appreciated the gesture. After the guests had gone and the house was quiet again, I stood in my kitchen and looked around at the remnants of celebration. Paper plates stacked in the trash, half-eaten cake on the counter, streamers hanging from the ceiling. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, afraid, betrayed, unsure of her own worth. I thought about the woman I had become, strong, independent, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was, not what she could give them. The journey had been painful. The coffee burns had healed long ago, but the emotional wounds had taken much longer. Yet here I was, standing on my own 2 feet, looking forward to whatever came next. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, please hear me. You are never too old to stand up for yourself. You are never too tired to fight for what is rightfully yours. The people who try to diminish you, who tell you that you are past your prime or no longer relevant, they are wrong. Your experience is your power. Your survival is your strength. What I pulled out of my pocket that day was just a piece of paper, but it represented something much bigger. It was proof that I had planned ahead, that I had protected myself, that I refused to be a victim. It was evidence of my own worth at a moment when my son tried to convince me I had none. The coffee was hot. It burned my skin and left marks that lasted for weeks. But the fire it lit inside me has never gone out. I want to thank you for listening to my story. I know it was long, and I know it was difficult to hear at times. But I believe that sharing our struggles helps us heal and helps others who might be facing similar challenges. Now I have some questions for you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you? Have you ever had to find your strength at a moment when you felt completely powerless? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like. It helps more people find these stories and know that they are not alone. And if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel so you do not miss future videos. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe a friend who is going through a hard time with their family. Maybe a parent who feels unappreciated. Maybe anyone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to reclaim your power. Thank you again for being here. I wish you strength in whatever battles you are facing. I wish you the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it is terrifying. And I wish you the peace that comes from knowing your own worth, no matter what anyone else says. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, the strongest thing you can do is refuse to be broken.